Welcome, everybody, to the Southern Oregon Housing Summit. I'm Erica Mills, the CEO of NeighborWorks Umpqua, and I'm proud to serve as a board member of Housing Oregon. I'm stepping in this morning on behalf of Brian Hoop, who is the executive director of Housing Oregon and unfortunately is sick and was unable to make it today. So we're sending him all of our best wishes for a speedy recovery and thank him for his leadership and the work he's done to make this event possible. It's truly a pleasure to welcome you to the 2025 Southern Oregon Housing Summit. Whether you've driven from across the state or from just down the street, your presence here speaks to the urgency and importance of the conversations we're here to have. This summit is a space for problem solving, practical collaboration, and vision setting. It's designed specifically for rural and smaller urban communities like ours, where housing challenges often come with unique obstacles like limited infrastructure, workforce shortages, and real constraints that require creative, culturally responsive, and innovative solutions with lived experience. Today, thanks to Housing Oregon's leadership, we'll explore tools and strategies to move the needle on housing production, affordability, and stability in our region. You'll hear from people that are doing the work, developers, nonprofits, state and local agencies, and service providers, all navigating the same terrain that you are. If you're new to this field, I encourage you to lean in, ask questions, and introduce yourself. If you've been here for a while, take the opportunity to recharge, reimagine, and reconnect. At NeighborWorks Umpqua, we've learned that there's no one solution to housing, but there is one constant, the power of partnership. When we bring our knowledge, our relationships, and our shared commitments, we create energy. And that energy, sustained by collaboration, trust, and determination, is what builds homes, communities, and lasting change. So let's make the most of today. Be generous with your insights, honest about your challenges, and bold in imagining what's possible. The future of housing in Southern Oregon starts with the people in this room, and it starts right now. So I'd like to start by recognizing the Planning Committee. In addition to the wonderful team at Housing Oregon, Jennifer and Christina in the back of the room, Brian and Kevin, who aren't here with us today. If you could stand up and maybe give a wave when I call your name. Jason Elzie from the Housing Authority of Jackson County. Alexia Ledesma from Coalicion, Fortaleza. Jennifer de la Mancha, Community Alliance of Tenants. The team from Rural Community Assistance Corporation. The team from Urban League of Portland, and Paul Brown. Sorry, I'm supposed to be advancing slides. Here we go. And I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors, JP Morgan Chase, Housing Oregon, and Park and Play Northwest. So for those of you who may not know, Housing Oregon is the statewide association of mission-driven affordable housing organizations. We represent everything from homeless services providers to multifamily developers to homeownership counselors. Our mission is to strengthen the collective voice and capacity of this sector through education, resource development, and advocacy. At today's summit, we hope you'll connect with peers, hear insights from local and state leaders, and learn from success stories. This is a chance to tackle shared challenges together and walk away with new ideas, partnerships, and practices you can put to work in your own communities. And I believe on everybody's table there is some information about Housing Oregon, membership information, and a save the date for the annual conference in Portland this year. So before we get started, a couple of quick logistics. The bathrooms are here in the middle of the room on that side. We've got men's and women's restrooms there. We'll start here with an open plenary session in just a moment, and at 10:40 we'll take a break and then work on ask and learn rotating table discussions. So you'll notice that in many of these tables there's a topic on a table tent. And so those topics will represent the topics discussed at this table. So we'll invite you to move around to find the table with the topic most interesting to you at that stage. We'll have more information for you when we get there. Lunch will be served buffet style. It'll be lasagna and time for informal connection. And then this afternoon features 2 rounds of breakout panels at 1:15 and 2:45. Then finally at 4:30, the Housing Authority of Jackson County will host a tour for their Cathedral Ridge development, and we'll provide more information at lunchtime. So let's kick things off with our opening plenary, and I'll invite our panelists to come join us at the table. Thank you all. So thank you again, panelists, for being here and attendees. In this plenary session, we'll talk about the challenges and opportunities facing the future of affordable housing in Southern Oregon. As you see, we've gathered a dynamic group of leaders representing government, nonprofits, and regional organizations from across Douglas, Josephine, and Jackson counties. These folks are working directly on the front lines, whether it's rebuilding after wildfires, strengthening tenant protections, advancing development projects, or shaping city and county policy. When the Summit Planning Committee put this panel together, we kept coming back to 2 big questions. What's standing in the way of affordable housing production and homelessness services in our communities? And what bold, practical solutions can help us move forward together? You'll hear a range of perspectives this morning, and the common thread across all of them, I expect, will be the belief that we move further when we move together. So I'll start by asking our panelists to introduce themselves, maybe say who you are, where you work, a little bit about your role and your perspective on housing in the community, maybe what motivates you. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Buenos días a todos. My name is Josephine Corona. I'm the Housing Justice and Advocacy Organizer with Coalicion Fortaleza. My role this past few years has been working with families who lost their home in the Alameda fire, specifically families from Talent Mobile Estates. I've also helped with with Camino Colibri, which is a housing project in Medford for agricultural workers. We also prioritized agricultural workers who lost their home in the fire.
Buenos dias. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ledesma. I use she, they pronouns. I am the executive director of Coalición Fortaleza. And yeah, these last few years, we've been focusing on fire recovery, ensuring that, our communities can return home and rebuild that sense of community. We also do wealth building and cultural placemaking. And so I really look forward to this conversation with other leaders, and it's good to share space with you all.
Hi, my name is Doug Walker. I'm a retired builder in the community and volunteer. I'm with Mid-Rogue Foundation, an organization that develops housing and offers navigation services as well. I've been, significant to this conversation. Last 10 years or so, I've been volunteering with the city of Grants Pass in a group called the Housing Advisory Committee, where we work towards eliminating and reducing obstacles to building, mostly in code and processes and planning within the city.
Good morning, everyone. Matthew Havniear, the Interim Executive Director for the Jackson County Community Long-Term Recovery Group, and also the coordinator of the Rogue Valley Community Organizations Active in Disaster. We've worked since the fires in 2020 in Jackson County to promote housing recovery and services for fire survivors, as well as coordinating active disaster response locally for Jackson and Josephine County. I've worked with a lot of you, and it's great to see you all this morning. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Janeal Kohler. I'm the Executive Director for the Housing Authority of Douglas County in Roseburg. We cover quite a large geographical span over to the coast, up to Drain and down to Riddle. Well, further, but our housing ends in Riddle. I have been with the Housing Authority since 2001 and started there as a receptionist. So my lens in which I've worked with the Housing Authority has changed drastically over the years. Of course, experience has changed as well. So I hope to impart some of the experience and do's and don'ts that I've learned over the years, and hope to encourage you guys to stay with the mission. It's worth it.
Good morning. Hey, Michael, it's nice that you got here. Maybe you could come a little earlier next time. My name's Jerry Gillham. I'm the city manager of Sutherlin, Oregon. Either famous or infamous, whatever. We have three things that we've kind of become known for. We're one of the few communities who, from the very beginning, created a homeless housing environment that is managed and well kept and in order, and we haven't received a single penny of government funding for it. It's all come out of our general fund. The other thing that we're kind of known for, and which I was reaching out for Michael, is that we have purchased and are in the process of building a workforce housing community, a neighborhood with about 85 residents in that community, with about 60 individual homes and 2 apartment complexes. We already have the first phase fully financed, received almost $3 million in grant monies for infrastructure, and it's going. And then we've recently received a $650,000 grant, and we're working with St. Vincent de Paul at creating a homeless family transitional facility for 13 families who can live and be in a managed facility for 2 years till they can get stabilized and move out on their own, and then new people will come in. So that's it, other than I don't know what else you're gonna want from me, but I'll talk if you want.
Good morning, I'm Amber Neeck. I'm the Housing and Neighborhood Specialist for the City of Grants Pass. My role includes making sure that the public, staff, and council are educated on housing matters, implementing our housing production strategies, and our methods on how we're going to meet the needs of our current citizens, and also managing our incentive programs to help attract developers to develop those types of housing that we need for our citizens.
Thank you. It's clear we have many challenges, but also quite a few exciting opportunities here at this table. I'll start by asking, what do you see as the most pressing barriers to affordable housing production or ending homelessness in your community? And what's a promising solution or approach that gives you hope? Would anybody like to start? Great.
I'll just take the whole thing. All right, does this one work? Yes. So there are many barriers, but I think the biggest thing we're struggling with is just in general that we're in a deficit, and building housing takes a while. There's no overnight solution to that. Some of the barriers that come into it are also long-term barriers that end up in our development codes and our zoning policies that make it more difficult to even find a lot that some of the larger housing projects can come in on. We're looking at what's affordable, and it tends to be apartments that are the most affordable, and then we have program restricted apartments, the low-income apartments. But those need larger lots, they need zoning that allows for higher density, and a lot of cities don't have much of that to begin with, let alone in a size that developers can make pencil out financially. So looking at any development code barriers that stop density from coming in and allowing developers to build these types of housings is imperative to allow us to build out of the deficit that we're in. That's just one, and I'll let others pepper in.
I don't think it's rocket science here. It reminds me of a story when I was in Iraq. I did 2 tours of duty there. I'm a personnel officer, but since they found out as a city manager, they put me in civil affairs. And so they had me put together this presentation on how to fund infrastructure and do land use planning, flew me down to Baghdad in a helicopter, and I sit down, there's this whole room of people. I needed an interpreter, and they're all staring at me like they didn't want to be there. And I said, guess what? I know why you're here, because you want money. And the whole room just broke up. It just cleared the entire area. It's exactly, they wanted money for water, sewer, electric, education. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to a willing government and money. That's the way it is. You're all here. And the reason you're here is because you don't have enough money to do what you need to be doing. I don't have enough money to do what we would like to do with you, and that's why we're working with Michael somewhere back there. He's helping put together a nonprofit for us.
Just to add on what Amber was saying, obviously we've been in a deficit decades in the making, a half century in the making through policy and program changes over the course of our recent history that has created a deficit, housing market crash, things like that. And then on top of that, on the West Coast, we now have raging wildfire disasters that are taking out more housing inventory, creating a bigger gap in the deficit. And when we're impacted by disasters like that, not just the resource of the housing inventory lost, but the buildable land resources impacted, the infrastructure, the funding resources, the money. All of those things have to be well balanced after disaster to recover, to at least get back to where we were, which was still a deficit, and then look to build better and build some ground on that. Some of the problems and challenges that come post-disaster is the timing of services and resources available. A big influx of funding in the beginning of the disaster, which doesn't last to the end of long-term recovery, and then programs that take time to build and implement locally, then come after fire survivors have moved on or found solutions. So coordinating some of those early resources to last long-term recovery, knowing that looking for investment opportunities that are already in place or currently being built so that they're open to disaster survivors early on and not years after the disaster where they've maybe already settled into new school zones and things like that. Supporting those local efforts and really the coordination of all the organizations that we have here today that have worked in this so that we're most efficient in how we utilize the scarce resources following disaster and then throughout to the end of long-term recovery.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. Thank you for highlighting that. We know that the costs are rising, but I want to talk more about like the social aspect of things. I think what we saw like after the fire, there was also a lot of community members that got in the way of the recovery of low-income Latino families recovering. So we also have that pushback from NIBBYs, not in my backyard. I think that's also a challenge that we face here in rural Southern Oregon, is that a lot of folks are against affordable housing because they have this assumption that criminals or people are going to be moving into their neighborhoods. And so I think that's some of the work that we really need to do in our own communities is like, have that cultural shift so we can really educate our communities about the diversity of families, right, in our regions, our neighborhoods. And that was a pushback that we had right after the fires. FEMA was trying to place some homes by some fields in Phoenix, and I know that a lot of the community came together to, say no, we don't want this. We don't want families to be here, and so it was just really upsetting to see that pushback, from allowing families to have some stability right after the fire. So yeah, I just want to note that, and also the workforce, construction workers, there is like a lot of exploitation that's happening, and they're the ones that are out there building the housing. So I think we really need to figure out from the root cause of housing, not just from wanting to build, but all the way down from the builders, right? Like ensuring that we do have policies to protect workers. And I just wanted to, bring that to the table, because since we are a nonprofit that is focused on advocacy, these are some of the issues that we do see in our communities that correlate with affordable housing and the housing development and Jackson County.
Thanks. So to your question about obstacles, I think I will say something kind of dense and simplistic here. I get accused of that regularly. It's about the cost. It's expensive. And I think to all of their points, you know, we definitely need more money in the system, and probably most of you all need a pay raise. There are things we can do, though, as individuals that don't cost money, and that is to find ways to eliminate bureaucracy or policies or things that get in the way. And I would challenge you all to take that home and say, okay, what is my department doing? And most of you are in housing, so you're probably looking through the lens of that already. But for those that maybe have influence over BOLI or ODOT or DEQ or all of those other state agencies that affect these things, I think they need to start looking through the lens of how can we get more housing built when they make decisions or when they create policy or when they look at policy and say, can we eliminate this? I think one of the big factors is all of those different layers of government that affect housing and what they have when they drive the cost up or what they do to drive the cost up.
I want to speak to capacity to some extent. As a smaller agency, in this industry, it is expected that we do more with less, and an enormous amount of more for less. So one of my questions to the room is, how many people in this room have been at your agencies for over 15 years, by a show of hands? Okay, not very many. How many between 10 and 15? How many between 5 and 10? So how many people have been at their agencies less than 5 years? So that alone kind of speaks volumes as to the amount of work that we're trying to get done and the experience it takes to get the work done, the knowledge, the communication skills it takes to get the work done and keep it moving forward. So every point that's been made up here is absolutely true, because it takes more money to have the better capacity, to have the staff it takes to get the work done. But the reality is we're constantly working with less to try to do quite a bit of work. And in my area, the biggest challenge for our agency is keeping that ball rolling and keeping staff motivated where they don't get discouraged because a project starts to kind of go by the wayside, whether it's waiting for funding, whether it's waiting for community partners, whether it's waiting for environmental reviews, you name it. There's a lot of moving parts. So I think, the solution, is recognizing that we're dealing with very complicated matters here, and that, again, it goes back to the partnerships. They're crucial. Being candid, being honest. There's times that I want to take on a project and I just can't, because I can't think that I can realistically move it forward timely enough to not miss out on the opportunities. And so understanding that and understanding it can take multiple attempts to finally get a project launched. And it's worth it in the end, but it can be quite frustrating, and I think we lose a lot of capacity during that process as well out of frustration. So working towards that, especially in meetings like this with partnering. Thank you.
So thinking about some of those challenges, what types of innovations, big and small, are you implementing to make changes in your communities?
I try to always take advantage of opportunity, even if I'm skeptical of whether it's going to pan out or not. Even if there's a grant that I'm not sure is the best fit, or that I'm going to totally be able to see it all the way through, I want to at least get the application out the door, because there's a lot of things that happen in between submitting the application and to when it's actually awarded, that moving parts that can come into place. So I think one of my biggest things is never not have the conversation with someone. Even if you're skeptical, even if you're kind of having a bad day where you're like, I can't win. Have the conversation. You never know where it's going to take you. Apply for the grant, even if you think it's a long shot. Try not to miss out on those opportunities. You just don't know you never know where they're going to lead to.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things we recently did this year in Jackson County was we incorporated the COC into some of our housing production strategy work and brought a housing strategy work group under the COC umbrella, which included all the COC partners, to inform different production pipeline strategy work. We're also heavily focused on promoting land trust initiatives to try to keep the cost of land, at least building on the land, down and out of the price of the new home ownership opportunities. The buildable lands, as most of you are probably aware, is very, very scarce resource within UGBs. Many of the lots that are available aren't, are missing infrastructure and high cost to get them build ready. So by promoting land trust initiatives and supporting those, finding funding to buy more land to put into trust is one way to keep costs down. And another just tangible program that could be implemented is like a regional building supplies cooperative, where if Habitat for Humanity is building homes and housing authorities are building homes, they could share the cost of those construction materials across a larger order and negotiate price breaks on wholesale materials to make the dollar stretch further. Sometimes it's harder to generate more money, but you can maybe make the money that you do get last further.
So I would say to what some of the things have been done locally for innovation. I think the city of Grants Pass had a housing advisory committee for about 7 or 8 years. Just recently, because of politics change, they eliminated it. And it spent quite a bit of time refining policies and eliminating obstacles. And I think that doesn't sound innovative, but it's practical. And I would suggest it to anybody out there that if you're in some community you're in, sit down with a committee and work out ways of making things easier. Just sit down and grind away at policies and figure out how to do that. And then the other thing I would add is your comment about opportunities. I think that is spot on. Talk to people about what you're doing and tell them what your needs are, and people will step up and be helpful in one way or another. And try not to be, I don't know what the right word, it's not reluctant or skeptical, but say yes and have that conversation and then see where it leads. And it tends to lead to something positive. It may not be exactly what you're after, but it may lead to something over here that's positive. So it's really worth having those conversations and exploring and finding where those opportunities are.
Hello again. So again, we are a nonprofit and we do direct services with families. And I think something innovative that we've done is that we were able to host community engagement events when Telen Mobile Estates and Camino Colibri were being developed. We hosted at least 4 for Telen Mobile Estates and 3 to 4 for Camino Colibri. And we invited people who would eventually qualify for Camino Colibri or Telen Mobile Estates, and we asked them, like, we're rebuilding Telen Mobile Estates, we're building Camino Colibri, like, what would you like this community to look like? So we were able to have input from the community before these communities were built or rebuilt, and the developers were able to take that information and put it actually in the development of the park and in the development of Camino Colibri. So these places were built to meet the needs of the community. And that's really unique because many builders will build the homes and then they say, if we build them, they'll come. And then they wonder why they're empty and nobody's applying for them because those things that they build don't meet the needs of the community that want to live there. Like, there's the need, yes, but if those houses and those buildings don't meet the needs of the family, then they're just gonna sit there vacant. Like, we see applications, we see emails, these apartments are still available, apply now. And it's like, yeah, we build apartments that don't meet the community needs, so they're gonna stay vacant for a while. So that's something unique about the work that we've done, and I know that the state is looking into making that a requirement for builders to actually host community engagement events because they do see the benefit of it. They do see that those lots stayed empty for less amount of time, and they see the benefit that people actually are proud to live in those communities because those communities meet their needs.
Thank you. Jerry, I'm surprised I haven't heard from you about innovation. I know the Oak Street Commons project is a little bit unique in your strategy for finding partners and financing. Do you want to talk a little bit about where you're going with that?
As you know, Erica, I can talk about anything. What we did is our mayor and city council went to a League of Oregon Cities conference, and we learned about the concept of workforce housing. And this was brought to us by the superintendent of schools and the local medical people saying, I can't get teachers, I can't get pre-med people, I can't get employees to come to Sutherlin because you don't have any homes that anybody can afford. So once we recharacterized it to the city council as it was an economic development initiative for long-term help, we were able to move more forward for that. I will say, I'll just tell you how we went about doing it, is we kind of start off as a local government feeling like we're going to go on our own. It's not until I meet Janeal and Erica later that I found out that we don't have to do it alone. But we start off, we're on our own. So we find a piece of property. This is ideal. It's near our downtown. And we just move to purchase it using urban renewal monies. And from there, we knew we had the basis of an asset that could be used for financing of some sort, plus our urban renewal. You know, local government, I mentioned this earlier to all of you, getting your local government to be on board with you from the very beginning, sitting down and talking to the planning and community development staff is very, very helpful, because we have means in which we can waive system development charges if it's going to result in economic development or improving quality of life of the community. So that's a way to do it. But when you own the property and you can waive SDCs up front and have an urban rural district, we had the foundation already in place, Erica, and so we moved forward on it right away. We connected with a Oregon governor-created nonprofit called iSector, and they said, we won't serve you or come help alongside you unless you can answer these 7 questions. Well, we had answered those 7 questions a year in advance, and when they saw it, they said, we're on board. So we've been moving along this far. In that process, the very next thing we did in partnership was contact our Oregon legislative folks and said, we need some money, and we received a $2.85 million grant to provide all the infrastructure to it. So, Erica, it's not so much innovation, it's a wanna. You know, you gotta wanna do it, and it's gotta be across the board from local government all the way to folks like you two. And they've been great. They serve on our regional task force that advises us on how we move forward with this. But once you have those things in place, there's no going back. There is only going forward, and you just keep pressing. We finally met with a bank who's going to finance the very first phase of this thing for us up front. Michael, you heard that? Michael Schrader is our finance guy, and he says you need to get, and so we got them yesterday. So I can't say it's innovation. It's you just got to want to do it. And you got to want to do it for not just, oh, we want to solve homelessness and low-income housing. We want to do it because we want to make a positive impact on our community and create to the economic development and livability of the community. Then it sells. It just goes from there.
Thanks, Jerry. To build on your point, housing is more than just shelter. It's a foundation for economic development. How are you all seeing housing as a driver of economic development in your communities?
Well, I think Jerry just kind of hit the nail on the head there is, you know, our employees need to be able to live somewhere. And, you know, we're already at a point where police officers and teachers are struggling to find a place to live, let alone the people that are working at the restaurants, at the hotels, whoever's working anywhere. So we know that the housing crisis is high. But you can't have economic development if you can't even house your employees. And let's be honest, Grants Pass is not somewhere someone's going to drive from Medford necessarily to work at a restaurant job, whereas in LA, maybe someone drives 40 minutes to get to their restaurant job. We're not that kind of community. So we need to be able to house all of our employees in Grants Pass.
Yeah, we're we're seeing that in Jackson County also. We're seeing non-traditional organizations involved in housing development that haven't been in the past. Hospitals are joining the conversation, looking for opportunities to develop. Southern Oregon University is looking to develop housing and others. And they're seeing the value of having a place for their staff to live without that as a challenge to their recruiting efforts, especially in some of those medical positions. So we're seeing a lot of those non-traditional developers come into the field and start developing, and it's going to take everybody.
How about the development process itself? Is there opportunity for economic development and workforce development through housing production? And what might that look like?
Yeah, I think very much. There's space for economic development through the hiring of laborers and hiring of people in the construction industry, and then certainly there's a few modular home construction factories that are popping up, and I think that's a great way of doing it. And to your previous questions about innovation, I think that space or that lens, I think, has some real room for worthwhile improvement, is the modular home construction projects.
Thank you. Matt, you mentioned some interesting or non-traditional developers. What sort of unique partnerships have you guys found, any of you, in your development process, or even just providing services to your residents or homeless services?
I think some of the most interesting partnerships have come through some of the land trust, development of land trust organizations, leveraging those private and public partnerships to deliver services to fire survivors and also increase the housing production. We're also seeing that at the local high school levels and getting more people into trades, getting trained for trades, and more pathways into the trades from the high schools locally.
Yeah, I think it's really important, for nonprofits that are local to work with also other CBOs that are developers. I think that was our experience with rebuilding Talent Mobile Estates. 18 manufactured home parks were lost in the Alameda fire, and we knew that those parks were going to have the hardest time recovering. And so for us as community members that were born and raised in, Talent in Phoenix, we did that research. I was like, who does resident-owned community work in the state of Oregon? And that's how we came across CASA of Oregon. Like, we didn't have those expertise in Southern Oregon, right? Like, we had to partner up with another CBO that does that work, that has that experience converting manufactured home parks as resident-owned community models, right? And it's exciting to see this new innovative way, right, of rebuilding. Like, that's the first rock model in Jackson County. And I also want to celebrate that 2 communities here in Grants Pass also worked with CASA to convert their parks into resident-owned communities. So that's exciting to see that residents are learning more about these models and saying, like, oh, our park is putting up for sale. Like, I've been living in this community for 30 years. Like, what's going to happen? So manufactured home parks are a great way for gaining home ownership, right? And the rock model also provides stability because the homeowners own their home and they own the land and they have a power and say over that future of the park, and so that was a great partnership that, we got to work with a developer like CASA, and then us as CBOs and Access, right? And also the City of Talent was very supportive in this process. They passed an ordinance to protect manufactured home parks. And so, that's a way that we've been able to work in partnership at different levels. Like, we're all needed. Like, all of us bring expertise, like, to the table, and we need to be brainstorming solutions to really stabilize, like, families, but also home ownership. It's not just about affordable rental. Like, we really need to get people into home ownership as well.
I'll add, at NeighborWorks Umpqua, we've been doing a strong effort in trying to engage with unique partners. So we've been working closely with our CCOs, our community college, and of course with our city leadership, and trying to find opportunities. Also, I'll say with some of the medical providers.
affordable housing is not generally the first place that a medical resident is looking for housing, but there are opportunities that we can help facilitate for them. So I feel like there's so many doors that can open if you can just get your toe kind of wedged in with that relationship.
I do have some, hello. The governor's in the process with the legislature of creating a revolving loan fund program. Have you heard about it? Are you guys familiar with it? It's a pretty incredible program. But I want to encourage you, before you just jump in and say, let's go that route, sit down with your local government. Are you familiar with enterprise funds? Enterprise zones? So enterprise zones are an industrial job creation program in which you identify a piece of property, it's enterprise zone, and if a company locates there, they can be free of property taxes for 10 years. Now they have to negotiate a PILT, which is called a payment in lieu of taxes, with the local government, where we get some money back from it, but that's it. This new revolving loan fund program is going to have an almost grant-given money, with the exception that the property you're building on is tax-free for 10 years. And make sure your local government's on board with that, supports it, and sees a greater benefit for the economy and the community going into the future. But I don't know if it's out yet. Do you two know? Michael might know. We've been working with Greg Wolf from my sector and the Oregon Legislature and the League of Oregon Cities. And that's coming out pretty soon, and it's got a ton of money. You might want to look to that and get your local government, sit down with your planning department and say, where is a good site that we could do some form of affordable housing / workforce housing component on a piece of property that would be tax-free for 10 years, but the benefit is you get this housing and homeless issue resolved in your community. So it's innovative because it's brand new. So I thought I'd share it.
We've talked a little bit here today about working with some of our local government. I'm wondering, for the government leaders and from the service, the developers and the service provider leaders, how would you recommend that people go about building relationships with our local government, and what sorts of opportunities should we be looking at as our door opener, or the thing that we're coming to engage with you on?
I just have the conversation, sit down and talk to them and tell them what you're doing, what's going on. Just make an appointment and go talk to them, whether it's at coffee or whatever it is. And if you can only talk to 2 of them at a time, talk to 2 of them at a time. But just start having those conversations and having FaceTime with them and explaining what's going on and what your obstacles are and how they can help. Definitely show up with a to-do for them as well, not just a conversation.
Coming from an area where there's quite a bit of dynamics across the county, the cities are very different, very, very differently in their approaches to progression, and which is one reason we really appreciate Jerry in Sutherlin is much night and day to some of the other localities in our county. So it's definitely changing hats when you go to talk to different locations, and data-driven, I think is really important, because I see a lot of conversations are driven by passion and personal beliefs, and then the fight's on. And so if there's statistics and historical information that can explain why your position is a certain way without saying that, something's just blatantly wrong in your mind. and there's a responsibility as agencies when you get up in the public before a live city council meeting that you are presenting in an impartial, professional, calm way that is going to be receptive. I see different approaches that I'm like, that the intent is understood, but the approach is distracting, and then the conversation stops. And so I think, from what I've seen approaches, the data-driven, you know, really trying to tell the stories, the testimonies of the success stories of why the request that you're making is needed and how this is going to be better than the alternative is, I find, to be more successful. But you also, I mean, I've seen time and time again where a suggestion or a request or progressive movements fall on deaf ears, and people get frustrated. And I mean, there's times when I look back historically now that I've been in the business as long as I've been, and I'm like, didn't we have this conversation, and didn't we do all this 15 years ago, and here we are doing it all over again with a whole new set of people. You just have to understand that that's the reality of it, and you just keep gently prodding, and at some point things are going to align, and you're going to get something to move forward successfully and productively for the whole community. And so you just got to stay positive with that. That's the only way to survive.
When I first started working in affordable housing, I was told it takes a minimum of 3 years to become an expert in all the programs. And by the time it's been 3 years, everything's changed already. So if it's that hard for us to understand what we're working on, remember that, because when you're talking to government officials, when you're talking to anyone really, you're also talking not only to them who are not necessarily experts in our field and sitting in it like we are, but you're also talking to the public who often do not understand. A lot of our programs are counterintuitive. They take the data, they take the explanation to understand, okay, low-income housing helps economic development because of this. And that took a while to explain. So explain it every time. Help humanize that data. What is the income limit? Who earns the income limit? What does that family look like? What is that income in your specific city? Find a specific job that earns that. Humanize it for your public officials, because it's been a while since maybe they earned that level of income, and the minimum wages have changed. Who is 60% AMI? Because that's workforce for me. But we hear that a lot, is we need workforce housing, and it doesn't connect that also affordable housing is workforce housing. So humanizing that data, explaining it like you are explaining to someone who has never heard it, because again, you're not just explaining it to that government official, you're explaining it to the public who is watching that explanation as well.
Great point. Thank you.
I want to add one thing. Coming from a background where I've been a terrible public speaker, it sucks, but you got to practice. You got to put yourself out there. You got to get into those conversations. If you're at a public meeting, make yourself get up and say a few things, because you gain that experience, and every time you do that, you get a little better on your vocabulary, you get a little bit better on your approach, you realize the different interpretations in the room and how to hone that. And if you don't actually do it, I mean, you can think it in your head all you want, but if you don't actually do it, you won't get better at it. And the better you get at it is when you start getting successful with the ahas. Yes, I would like to talk more. So it's painful, trust me. It's very painful, but make yourself get up there and improve on your communications.
Yeah, those are all really great strategies. I would just kind of echo the alignment of what you're trying to accomplish in their strategy. Every jurisdiction, municipality has their own idea how to get things done. They have their own vision and strategy for their community, and it's often easier to find out where you fit into their strategy, invest a little bit of time to learn what that is, and do that prep work going into where you're gonna best fit within their strategy and still accomplish your mission. It's probably easier to do it that way than to try to get them to agree to your strategy.
We'll get to questions in just a moment. Erica, do you have anything to add about government relations? No? Okay. What's one thing you wish funders or state agencies better understood about your local context? And how could that understanding help improve outcomes on the ground in your community?
I'm going to jump right in and say I think they underestimate the amount knowledge that it takes for our agencies to do the work that we're doing. if they haven't been in the trenches before, it's talked about as if, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Wait till we can just do this and this and this. And it's like the not understanding all the moving parts. And so that is something that, you know, is a challenge for us, is to that it's not that easy. We got to do this, we got to do that. And oh, by the way, did you realize the law you enacted last year prohibits us from doing this now? You know, and so it's ongoing. Yeah.
I'll just add to that, it's capacity. I mean, we hear a lot, well, all these programs heavily get funded in Portland. Well, that's because Portland has a lot of large organizations with large capacity. They can build large projects, which means they can have large departments that can help support these programs going through. Whereas here, we might have an organization who's dipping their feet into building for the first time. They have a small group of people. They don't have as much support, and for lack of a better way to say it, taking the hand-holding to the extreme on these smaller cities, on these smaller organizations to get them over the line, because I recognize that we have to be competitive with our funding to make sure we're getting the best projects for our dollars, but that is so easy to exclude someone who's trying to get in for the first time, and then we start losing developers who age out or no longer want to be in the business, and we have not provided the opportunity for new organizations to come in and backfill that, because it has become so strict to be the best, and someone brand new is going to really struggle to be the best. They need to be able to just allow in and learn.
I'd like to thank you for mentioning hand-holding to the extreme, because in my role, I've been told that I do too much hand-holding, and our community needs that hand-holding. We are all BIPOC women. We are all Latinas. We're all, Spanish is our first language. So we do work with families who don't speak English and who have been navigating or have to navigate a system that they don't understand. Even when the forms are given to them in Spanish, I can tell you guys that from my own experience, I'm bilingual. I majored in Spanish. I mean, minored in Spanish, sorry. And like sometimes I don't understand the forms that the state's giving us in Spanish. So I help families fill out forms, and I'm looking at the English form just to fill out the Spanish form. And I'm a college educated person. So, I mean, providing something in Spanish just because you Googled it and printed it out does not mean you're providing a Spanish service. I do a lot of hand-holding because our community needs it. Our community was impacted by the fire. Our community are migrant workers. There are people who are undocumented or who live in a mixed status household, and they don't trust agencies. They don't trust where their information is gonna go. Our agency, we're pretty, I wouldn't say lucky, but something unique about us is, again, we are all Latinas. We're all from Southern Oregon. We are all either born in Mexico or like from parents of Mexico. We're migrants ourselves. So like we already have that connection that like people don't have to explain to us. Myself, I grew up in an undocumented household, and I currently live in a mixed status household. I'm also a fire survivor. So when families come to me, I know what they're going through. I don't need them to explain anything to me. I empathize with them, and I see them, and I meet them where they're at. We are trauma-informed, and we're not business as usual. Fill out these forms, good luck. Let's talk about how you're feeling today. Before I even start filling out forms with them, I talk about their kids, how they're doing. Make them feel like they're not just another person for me. Like I do a lot of case management, and my caseload is pretty much all of TME and Camino Colibri, but that doesn't mean that I don't have time to spend 20 or 30 minutes to talk to them because they had a bad day at work and now they can't figure out how to go get this paper from the bank that another agency is requiring from them. I'll spend those 20 or 30 minutes, let them cry, and then we'll be like, I'll go to the bank with you. Let me drive you to the bank, and I will go and ask for that paperwork for you. We get the paperwork, we make it to my office, and then I scan it and email it. And these people come to my office in a panic mode thinking, oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose my housing because I can't get this one document. I just let them just de-stress, talk to me about whatever is stressing them out, whether it's housing related or not, and then we just business as usual. Let's go to the bank and get that paperwork that you needed, and then I'll help you with the next steps so that you don't lose your housing. But yeah, like I do hear from other agencies that we do a lot of hand holding, but that's because it's needed. Again, our community has a lot of trauma, whether it was before the fire, whether it's because they're immigrants, whether because it's the political climate. I mean, gosh, since January, we have even more hand-holding to do because it's needed. Not because we have nothing better to do, but because it's needed.
Thanks, Roxana. I also just want to say collaboration. You know, I feel like a lot of times we're working in silos and competing for funding, but how can we as communities, you know, in Jackson County or Josephine County, you know, just like come together and say like, this is the funding that is available. Like, how can we leverage that money and work together to, you know, build affordable housing in our community and what that looks like? Because we all have different expertise, right? Like, we're more survey-based. We can help those families fill out applications. We don't know the development side, but if we're working with private or nonprofit developers, like, how can we actually work together to fill those gaps and ensure that housing projects are going to be successful? And you know, I love that we're seeing that more in Jackson County right after the fires. You know, like, it really devastated our community, but it really did bring us together to be like, no, we have to work together, right? Like, we're not in competition. We all have something to give, and we need to be in these spaces. So I just want to echo that you know, everyone in this room has ideas and solutions, and it's the matter of like collaborating and coming together.
Well, I'll add, thank you so much, Erica. I totally agree with that. I think if I were to have our state and federal leaders understand one thing about our local context, it's that everything that we do happens in an ecosystem. And you know, all of our projects, whether it's a significant multifamily development project or just ongoing funding for homeownership supports or resident engagement, all of that happens to or with families and individuals that have jobs in the community, that have children in the community, that are seeking health care in the community, and their teachers and doctors and the police officers that are policing their streets all need places to live and are all also engaging with all these various systems as well. And I think sometimes our projects and our grant requests can get lost in a silo, and that we can sort of single ourselves out rather than considering the role that we play in the larger ecosystem. And very often the funding sort of demands that, which is, I think, a real disservice to rural communities in particular and smaller urban communities that really do have a capacity shortage and depend on each other to lift each other up and help fill those capacity gaps and fill those funding gaps and fill those needs. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I add something? I would say to that capacity need in the rural areas, I think we're in the middle of a project and looking the pro forma on the project. We don't get to spin off very much money from that to pay for a grant writer for something in the future or some other entity, another person in the future. And I think if there were space within the system to allow for that when a project is done, I think that could seriously help the rural communities develop more things. And I would, to all of you OHCS people that are here or the state level people, really allow for some money to be spun off of projects so that they can then pay for the next person to do another project.
I was thinking kind of along the same lines. The silos don't just happen in community, right? They also happen at the state level. We love our partners in OHCS, obviously housing is their mission, but in housing there's a human service element, right? And ODHS comes into play, and there's a health authority component and an emergency management component. And I think if we were gonna, when we're talking to our state partners, really encourage that cooperation at the state level also to braid funding. Sometimes that's up to us to braid the funding together, multiple different sources, but it would be interesting to have those done at the state level and presented to community as opportunities, because there is a component of all the Oregon acronyms in housing.
Yes, thank you. I think we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. We are broadcasting, streaming, and so I'll run the mic to you. If you want to raise your hand, I'll hoof it over. And I know there was a question here to start. Okay?
Thank you. My name's John Norman. I live here in Grants Pass. I've been working with a group of people that are innovators, I would say, and one of them is Amber. She's been really just remarkable. It's a little bit difficult to approach entities that are big and sometimes confusing, And we actually have somebody that cares. And if you can be that person in your organization, in your city, you can be the spearhead for something that we've been lucky enough to put together. And I should say that we've put together multifamily projects. We've cleared one in Portland, and we're going to rubber stamp them and do a 89-unit property that we can actually do in other parts of the state as well. So if you're looking for somebody to partner with, we're a bunch of guys and girls that want to do a very large amount of units and consider this a mission, but with a great deal of professionalism that we bring to the table. And our little group is called Home Sweet Home Oregon. So it's not very easy to forget. I'd like to indicate the other types of housing we have. We have a 372-unit project as well that can be put together in 21-unit groups. So it's a multi-phase project. So if you want to have more units than our basic model, and it's really plug and play in those terms. So the third thing that we have, we're looking for developers. I guess we're up to the fourth thing. We do individual homes that are like Quonset huts. I don't know if many of you people know what a Quonset hut is, but back in World War II, the military put together these aluminum or steel. Gosh, I've forgotten. What is it? I think they're steel. Homes that you can put together. Well, actually, they weren't homes at that point, but we produce them as homes. And they have generally 2 weeks till you're dried in. You have these big, beautiful glass windows that go in the front that are 15 feet tall. And we can put up to, well, it's actually an unlimited number of bedrooms in them. So if you need to have something produced very quickly, those kinds of elements can be put on the table for people that are in need of a quick but stable home. See, yeah, sorry, I was just looking at my notes to see which one I was going to ask first. In consideration of what I'm calling climate collapse, because we've already been through climate change, have you seen solutions in your jurisdictions that can deal both with the insecurity of the current housing situation and the impending, whatever you call climate collapse? And is there a way for us to meet both of those challenges in one sort of product? Thank you.
So I think the question was, how do we resolve a housing crisis and a climate crisis at the same time? Is that what you're asking? Panelists?
I think that's a great question. And we've actually have some partners in this room today that have taken on some of that work through some different innovative building strategies, building design, through tech panels or people exploring 3D concrete printed homes, things like that. The standard catchphrase is build back better, and that is a technique of building back better than what was lost, right? If we just replace what is lost, we're setting ourselves up to be vulnerable again. So using resilient building construction products and having fire-safe communities and fire-safe building landscape designs, and encouraging our neighbors to do the same so that we have fire-safe communities.
Yeah, I would add to the climate change and helping with housing issues, lack of housing would be, I think, density, which has a lot to do, a lot of positive impacts on what you do outside of the home itself, how you get to work, and all of those other things that influence energy consumption. And most modern codes are fairly energy efficient, and they're pretty good at building decent housing. I would say be careful with the idea of doing a really fantastic job making something super energy efficient, because the return on investment for the last 5% of perfection is an awful expensive 5%. So be careful of that mindset when you start a project and you start yourself going down that path. You could end up expending an awful lot of energy and money trying to get that 5% energy efficiency at the very end, and it's like, was it really worth the money?
Great, thank you. We have a question in the back here.
Good morning. My name is Nikki Messenger, and I'm the city manager from Roseburg. Thank you all for coming to share your expertise. Mine's part comment and part just planting a seed for the brain trust that's in the room and all of the alphabets. In Roseburg, we have Umpqua Community College, who has been building student housing and doing a fabulous job, and because it's got the word student in it, it does not qualify for any of the programs, because people think students don't need affordable housing, but in fact they do. And community college students, their average age at Umpqua Community College is 32, but they don't qualify for any of the programs. So I'm asking the Brain Trust if there's a way, how do we start changing that mindset? Because students were living in affordable housing projects in our town before. The community college is doing the right thing, trying to provide housing, but they can't get support from the programs that are supposed to support those programs. So their next project is family housing. They cannot get support from state housing dollars because they're a community college and they have a demographic that they're serving, but they're opening up space for the entirety of the community. So if anybody's got any ideas, for the folks in the alphabet agencies, if you've got ideas, please, I'm just planting that seed and looking for advice on how to advance those things, because they're making a huge difference in our community.
Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that if you are not a full-time student, you can still qualify for many of the affordable housing programs. It's really the full time that triggers the disallowance. But I agree with you that the support for student housing is needed out there. That's all I have to offer right now.
Thanks. Student housing is workforce housing, or at least workforce development. We have another question here in the back.
Hi, my name's Ron Lee with Utility Mate, and we build products to help with the housing issue. Now, a lot of what I've been hearing since my involvement is government and programs have money available and programs available to get people into housing, but there's a real lack of units available. And ultimately, that comes down to something that Doug brought up, and I was waiting to hear it, is return on investment. And you have a lot of developers out there who just, they don't have a return on investment, and a lot of that is the time that it takes to get a project moving forward. So you've got months, maybe even years in some instances, where these developers are just languishing and spending money and trying to put these developments together and build these workforce houses or what have you. And so what do you guys see as major hurdles for developers, and how can you support them into doing something that is maybe out of the box, something that maybe aligns with Oregon law like SB 1013 that allows for RVs to be placed as primary residences or secondary dwellings on rural land? Thank you.
I'll pick up again. So I absolutely hear you on that time issue. Time is money, especially when you're in pre-development, in the beginning of development, and any added thing that needs to be done for your development adds another set of weeks. So, you know, we hear it a lot in grants past, we need more buildable land. Part of that is that we have a lot of land that has yet to be annexed from our urban growth boundary. So some things that cities can do in that is look at, you know, can we annex neighborhoods all at once? So that removes that piece, that added time for developers. It's already ready to go, because time is also uncertainty for people. And each time you have to go in front of the UAPC or city council, that's also another element of uncertainty. So really being able to look in on ourselves and see, are all of these levels necessary, or is there anything we can do ahead of time in a large scale so that developers can come into this area and know that that extra piece of uncertainty and time is now waived or brought back down. those are some ways that we can kind of look at it. But again, that takes time and money on the city's end, so being able to support cities in doing initiatives such as that.
Thank you. Other questions? Staying on that topic of uncertainty, how else has uncertainty impacted the projects that you all have been working on? In what ways have you used to mitigate that uncertainty?
Well, there's lots of uncertainties out there. Cost of materials, inflations, political whims, variety of things. But I think all of our desires to chip away at this problem and work this problem, I think, and that faith in ourselves and faith in what's going to happen 6 months from now, I think is what we use, I would assume, is what we use to move forward and to keep plugging away at the problems.
I think making sure you're really forward thinking on your strategy and your timelines and your in-house organization. All of our agencies, it's rare to have someone that can just focus strictly on development, so you're wearing multiple hats, especially if there's a development project that's kind of sitting waiting for something else to happen before it can move forward. So keeping that in-house communication going, motivation-wise, making sure that if the person in charge of the development is also wearing another hat, that they're not getting too distracted from making sure they're responding to any movement on that particular project. So it takes a really forward-thinking strategic plan to make sure that your projects don't miss any important deadlines, and that's hard to do with all the hats everybody's wearing.
I remind my staff all the time of the Stockdale paradox. Always keep the mindset that you will prevail no matter what, but always keep the reality of the challenges ahead in the front of your mind. Other questions?
Folks that are developing workforce housing, are you ever asked for like a guarantee or a requirement that your residents are employed in the local community? And if so, how do you navigate that?
Yes, we are doing the workforce development. It's called Oak Street Commons. It'll be developing. Hi, Nikki. Thank you for calling me a brain trust. It's the only time you'll ever say that about me. My counterpart
She wasn't
in
talking
Roseburg.
about you, Jerry.
But yes, Michael Schrader's here. He's helping us. We're creating a land trust to manage it. And within the framework of that land trust, there will be property ownership. The one thing we can't do is we originally started out saying you must work in Sutherlin in order to live there. But what we can do is you must work. And this is financed by and for the purposes of your work. And it kind of takes care of itself. But since we started, we've got Roseburg Lumber, Lone Rock Timber, Aviva Health, Douglas County-wide businesses coming and saying we'd like to be part of it. So we're not worried about whether they're in Sutherlin or not. Keep in mind we're a bedroom community to Roseburg, where Nikki's the big kahuna there. And if we did that, we'd actually kind of harm citizens who work in Roseburg but live in Sutherlin. But the land trust takes care of that, and we let Michael resolve it. But you have to be part of that system and be part of the AMR and the financing criteria. But other than that, in the application process, you have to show you're employed, and that's all we're going to worry about.
Good morning. This is John Walker. I work with Umpqua Sheet Metal up by Roseburg. And we're generally a commercial developer, but we've been in the same area for over 50 years, a union shop. Most recently, in the last 3 years, we've taken on a residential approach also with multifamily dwellings as one of our primary focuses. So I've noticed I've developed a program called Energy Star Buildings for the federal government when I worked at the Douglas County Courthouse for 15 years, about 20 years ago. So I'm kind of an old guy, but I know stuff. And along that line, we've been offering some very high efficiency equipment to the multifamily dwelling industry throughout Roseburg and throughout the entire state of Oregon. We build things for colleges and multifamily dwellings. I have a lot of equipment, so this might sound like a commercial because it is. So if you need some, we've also been able to stack a lot of grants with the Oregon Department of Energy for zero-cost equipment installations for multifamily dwelling. We've also done zero-cost projects with the Energy Trust of Oregon, which is here today. So a big shout out to them. And it's kind of nice to meet all of our friends and neighbors from Roseburg down here in Grants Pass.
Go ahead, Jerry.
He brought up a good point. So we've already developed a partnership agreement with Hayden Homes, Simplicity Homes in Central Oregon. And they're building all the homes, and they created already pre-built models that whoever buys could pick that model, or that model, and fit within the criteria of it. But he brought up a good point that if you're looking at doing something, get somebody like this who will partner with you and say, we'll come alongside and we'll build under this criteria for this amount for each home. Hayden Homes has actually already penciled out all the homes, so an average $350,000 home in our community you can get for $230,000. For example, it gives you an example how we buy down that debt. Now, the great question I know somebody's going to ask is, well, what happens if they buy a house in your subdivision and a year later they want to sell and get that full thing? That's what the land trust does. It manages it to where they can only sell the home based on its assessed value for that period of time, and leave it at that, so that the next people that come in are buying in under, CPI type of thing.
Can I add? I think one of the things we need to be cautious of is that it's okay to be involved with a private entity that's going to make a profit. Sometimes there's a lot of perfectionism in passionate people that want to just keep everything low income and nonprofit, nobody making any money, and that really hamstrings us in getting things done. So I think we need to be cautious and be careful with our perfectionism. It's okay to be involved with entities that make profits.
Along that line, this is John again, Umpqua Sheet Metal from Roseburg. Write that down. I can give you the phone number, but I'll pass out cards later. We do make a profit, but we're flexible. I have 60 union employees, so we don't make much profit. You know what I'm saying? We do have a lot of inventory, and I've recently started really working with the Energy Trust and the Department of Energy and reaching out to nonprofits, trying to help you guys out. So whatever we can do. I've also recently increased our workforce to 60. So my payroll is about $250,000 a week. That said, we're training people on grant applications, and it's a nail puller, it's a tooth puller. A lot of you guys are professionals at it. If there was a way to have a grant writing coalition that could help get everybody in, I think the savings through energy efficient equipment could help stack money back into your coffers that could help more high efficiency development. So if you have a housing development that's full of electric resistance heat, and you know it because you're paying the electric bill, and it's sailing right to the moon every winter, or you got window units and they're chopping you up, think about how you can make that change. Stack a grant. Recently, the Department of Energy has also released, even to the general public, $2,000 for energy efficient retrofit. And later, of course, you'll hear from the Energy Trust of Oregon what they have to offer, and there's a multiplicity of offerings there, and it's fantastic. We're also working with the tribes, and it's been great.
Thanks, John. For anybody who's looking for resources and grant writing, I can share that the Ford Family Foundation and Rural Development Initiatives have some Learn by Doing grant writing programs. I think I'm going to pass it over to the panel for just some final reflections briefly, and then we'll move into break. Whoever would like to go.
Well, fine, I'll go. I think we've all kind of echoed the same sentiment. I think recognizing that this is a very complicated industry, being kind to yourselves as you work through it, especially for those that haven't been in the industry very long. One of the things I always tell my staff that get really frustrated because they're all type A personalities. They want to be successful quickly in whatever field they're working in. You can't train on experience. You can tell them and tell them and tell them and help each other as much as possible, but until you experience full cycle development or whatever aspect of the company that you're working in, it doesn't comprehend. So that takes time. And when there's turnover in the industry, we lose that momentum. And so we have to recognize that that's happening, whether we like it or not. And for those that are, sticking with this, it's very rewarding. It is challenging. It's not for the faint of heart. But being strategic, and again, the whole emphasis on partnerships in this type of work is huge. So, not letting it get you down, always kind of repeating and reopening up those conversations and being open to those opportunities is the message that I just want to share and leave with.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to restate that for those of you that are maybe at the state level, that there are, I think, some significant puzzle pieces in the housing crisis that it doesn't seem like the state is working on or using, and that would be those other departments, BOLI, ODOT, DQ, Consumer Business Division. I think there really needs to be some effort from those agencies of taking ownership of the housing crisis and what they can do to make it easier to build. Then the other thing I would say, that we also need to pay attention to sort of market rate construction, those developers that just build things, because those will in 50 years or 70 years, or some of those will in 50 or 70 years, become those naturally occurring low-income housing. And if we can make sure that pipeline is flowing and things are being built there, then there won't be as much need for state-funded, grant-funded low-income housing, and that would sort of relieve some of the pressure on us, and we could focus on maybe more specific cohorts of people that need housing. So hopefully we can also pay attention and put resources towards efforts to just get more duplexes and more triplexes, more fourplexes built by the average mom and pop out there. So that would help in that realm in 50 years.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much for participating on this panel. Thank you for being here. I know some of you had to travel a little bit of a distance, and others of you were in the neighborhood. So thank you again. We appreciate your insight and all the information that you've shared. Let's give it up for our panel.